growing up, my father's cousin, it was always known that, and I pray this comes out with the right measure of sensitivity because it is a sensitive thing. And it's very, like, it's important to me, like, that it's compassion and to brush off or lightly mention. But we had a family member, and we were always talked to about this, and especially just to be aware of our surroundings, and yeah, just to know that anything can happen to you. Like, nobody is exempt from life, from difficulty, from hardship, or from the worst imaginable thing. So we had a cousin who, and I guess it was a while before we were born, me or either of my sisters or anything, that went out to walk their dog, and unfortunately, and she was, assaulted and unfortunately murdered. And so this was something that we knew, and we would be talked to about it. And whenever we would see these family members, like, it was a thing that when you're a kid anyway, right? Not as an adult, but when you're a kid, you think about that because you know about it. And so, they had since had, a daughter that was like our age. It's like maybe a year or two older than I am. And so, whenever we would see this family member and talk to the daughter, because that's our cousin, play, hey, it's so good to like see you and stuff. Like, but as a kid, these are things that you remember and think about. So just being around them whenever we were, or just knowing someone, because you hear these stories, but a lot of us, we don't necessarily actually know people that these things happen to. So that was always there, and it was always close and known. And it was always close to the point where I knew that something like that could happen to me. It wasn't like a story on the news. In high school, a cousin whose child was murdered, that was there. It was always there, like the knowledge of it, and the knowledge of how real these things are, because it's not just happening to some people that I read about on the news. These are people with my blood. Then, I think I was about 12, 13. I honestly don't remember at this point. If I really looked it up, I would remember. So within my mother's sisters, the oldest, my aunt, my cousin, he was murdered. And yes, he was like living a certain type of, lifestyle, but he was murdered. He was only 19 years old. And that was just devastating for us. Then, not too long after that, my younger sister, her cousin, beautiful woman, beautiful young woman. These are all people young. He was 19. But this one, she was 20 something, or very early 20s. And, we spent time with her, was around her, because she lived with my sister at a point. But she was murdered in a murder-suicide. And I'm saying these things only because these are things that have been with me, actively in my mind, actively in my heart, in my spirit, that have always been there as the reality of death, of suffering, the reality of pain and suffering in life, and the reality that it's not just people that you read about on the news. It's there. It's within you. And so I often think, like, is that how people, who actually have to watch all the time, like people that are around like gang violence and that kind of stuff, like, because like, okay, well, it's death. Death is life. And so, yeah. So anyway, so that happened with her. Then after I was in the military for, just a couple of years. It wasn't too long. I was pretty young still. Then within my mother's family still, the same aunt where my cousin, where he where he was killed. His brother, and this is the one that I was closer with and had more of a like closer type of relationship with. He was younger, closer in age to us. Yeah, we were around him all the time, a lot. And we really actually had a relationship. So he gets killed, and he was a little bit, I don't think as much as his brother. He was a little bit in, you know, a certain type of lifestyle as well. But then he gets killed. You know, his brother was 19. I want to say he was 20. He might have been 26 or 25. I don't remember without looking up our ages and everything anymore. I'm in my, you know, my early 20s as well. So he gets killed. And so it's like, dang, like both of them. And so that blow was really hard because there was a relationship there. So fast forward a couple of years, my sister. So now it was my mother, my aunt's 2 sons. Now my mother's daughter. So my sister, we get the call about my sister. And there was something very traumatic going on at work for me at this time, where I was facing to be in a lot of trouble. I didn't know what was going to happen with me. And I mean, I had people just, it was really bad, where you have like a lot of people against you and talking about you, and yeah, it's just really bad. It's like being on display to be slaughtered. I guess that's the way to think about it. Like treated like you are nothing and the worst thing ever. And then you have minimal people that, you know, are with you and for you and are in agreement with you. But even some of them, they kind of want to be quiet about it because they don't want the others to know. So this is all going on. And as this is going on, like I'm actually at work dealing with these type of issues, you know, about to find out, you know, if I'm going to be in trouble, what's going to happen, when is, you know, whatever's going to happen. I get the call about my sister. My mom calls me, tells me everything that's going on. I let them know at work. So I had to, you know, hurry up and leave. But she got into a car accident. And it was fatal, and she ended up dying. And this is my older sister. Going through what I had been going through, this is the person that gives me the outlet, the release, the strength, the encouragement during that time of persecution on the job. And now she's gone while I'm still going through it. So right in the thick of it. And so, yeah, so you know, watching people lose their children, that there's nothing like it. And so, you know, my condolences, and my heart is out to anyone who experiences that, either the loss themselves or watching it. So it hits us. So first you know, my 2 cousins, my aunt's 2 sons, then my sister. Fast forward a little bit later, you know, just a couple short years later, by this time I end up getting married. I was pregnant with my son. So not too long after I got married, I was pregnant with my son, and my aunt, she dies. And these are women, you know, my parents, my mom, my aunts, they're like barely into their 50s at this point. So they're not like, they're not old women. But you know, I get the call that she dies. So we go home, you know, to bury her. So it's like our little immediate family of like, you know, the grandma, which my grandmother had ended up dying shortly after my sister died, actually. So yeah, so my grandmother had died shortly after my sister died too. And I am actually named after my grandmother. So I'm the namesake of the family. God has jokes. But my grandmother, she died. And then, you know, within like the next year or however long it was, that's when my aunt dies. So our family is dwindling and dwindling down. So right after my aunt dies, my cousin, one of my closest, the one, one that I am like almost closest with, the aunt who died, her daughter, who's like barely 12 years older than me. So I grew up being looked after her like, another big sister. But her son is only like, 4 years younger than me. So he was like my little brother. But he dies. And he was a baby. He might have been 21 or 22. After that aunt died, then her grandson, my cousin's son, the one I was very close with, then he dies. Young, amazing kid, just funny, full of life, had only been in the Army for a little bit of time, and he was just everything. He died in a motorcycle accident. So that one hit me the hardest because this time, I don't know what it was, if it was because this one was younger than me and I watched this one as a baby to growing all the way up. And so that was the hardest hit for me. So he died. We took some hard hits and they were all back to back to back. And so one thing, even my husband said it to me one time. He was like, babe, I'm not trying to be like funny or whatever. He was like, it just seems like somebody is always dying in your family. And so I'm like, yeah, I know. But what happened to me is I love God. I know God. And I understand, from the word of God, what it really is. Life truly is a vapor. And so, Ecclesiastes is like my favorite book of the Bible. But with all of the death and all of just everything that was so close to me and seeing it so back to back to back, where my husband would see it's a sacrifice. We're just making a sacrifice. This is temporary. You serving in the military, retiring, that's temporary. To me, nothing is temporary because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And I have strong evidence, like, whereas you would think, but you're young. I always hated when people would say things like that. Like, you young, you got all this life you don't know that. I don't know that. So all I know, the only thing that matters is you better know God. And so that's always been my outlook on life. So I've seen the quickness of death, and most of these people that I talk about, very young, and the youth are not exempt. And so for me, going to the military service thing and doing this, once I got away from my kids, God, the only reason that I live, the only reason I'm like okay with being here, because life is like, and this is not in a depressive, like, no, not at all type of state, but life is like nothing to me other than I'm here for God's purpose, because that's the only reason I'm here. And, for whatever my children need, and to be with my children and see them. So when God pulled me out of that, what am I here for? What are we doing, God? Like, I'm serving all of these people within the military. So my job, I am a job counselor, we'll call it. And so I deal with a lot of counseling, mentoring, especially young women, right? Because I don't want them to make all the mistakes that I used to make. But I would see that. I saw what I was doing and what God had me doing, right? I could see that. Hello. Okay. So, yes, some things have happened. I had to take a break. But to pick up where I left off. So, throughout the rest of my time, in the military with the job that I have, I'm always before the people. The people are constantly before me. They have to come to me to handle things with their career. And, I don't even really necessarily advertise, hey, I'm a believer. But, like during just general conversations, counseling, God has always opened the door in some, form or fashion for me to be able to, really pour out, really share his goodness, really talk about Jesus. And some people might not like that, but, one thing I stand firm on is, like I said, for me, it's really like, if I'm gonna be here doing anything, all it can be is doing God's will, because as we know, heaven and earth are gonna pass away. And so our only purpose ultimately is whatever God's purpose is. And ultimately his overall purpose is that everyone come to the knowledge of Christ and salvation. And so he always opens up a door for witnessing, for ministering, when people need prayer, whatever it is, when I'm, working with people on a job. So it's like, okay, like I'm doing it. I know that, I'm serving the people and pouring out the truth of God's word to the people. But then it comes a point after so long where it felt like, okay, God, but I'm doing this, but what about my own people? My children, something for me to enjoy life for and live life for, especially because I don't know what the number of my days are based off of the fact that just in general, period, there's life and there's death. But also I know what's going on within my bloodline. And so, yeah, that has pretty much been why I am the way I am about the military. But at the end of the day, I can never turn away from God and turn away from the call. I've tried, but I can't. Now, during that time, I'm still serving, still witnessing, ministering to people, on the job and, wherever I might be, attending a church every now and again once like things kind of let up, definitely like watching services and everything online. But every time that I would be like, okay, God, I'm not fighting anymore. Every time it would be like, I'm not fighting anymore, God. I'm gonna like go for real, because I knew, and I know God will have me share it at some other time, but I knew there was another, I don't know if I should say portion or level of the calling that God has on my life. I knew that. And I've known that for a very long time. And because of me knowing that, I always knew it's gonna come with a great deal of suffering, whatever that might be, whatever that might look like. And so I would try to turn from it. And I don't know when, but at some point I know that God will release me to speak on these things. But until then, like I said, whenever I would decide, okay, I'm gonna go forward with it and I'm not gonna fight anymore, the enemy would come in hard through a lot of warfare, in a way of warfare in dreams, warfare in the mind. And I would be tired, like, I'm not about to do this. And so as soon as I would stop, the enemy would let up and stop. And so the testimony of many different, pieces of warfare and different experiences in battle, and the one that I just came out of, I don't know when God's gonna release me to speak on that, if he ever does. But I know that when he does, if he does, I will speak it in truth. One thing I will mention, the ministry that I served at, that I, was a part of for so many years. We were an outreach and deliverance ministry. So not even everything that I understood at the time, but God fully equipped me and prepared me to fight every single battle, attack that came soon after I was out of that ministry. Also, the man that I'm married to, the greatest man that I know, just being married to him, the type of man that he is, that within itself, for every battle and every fight that God already knew he was sending me into, which I knew it was going to be something, which is why I was rejecting it, trying not to walk into it. This man, I don't know any personality type, any heart posture type that would be better or better equipped to deal with this level of fight in battle, and to be able to say, oh, we about to fight and we gonna keep on going, and you better keep on fighting. And so God knows, even what I didn't want to do, God knew he had already put everything in me to do it. And so I know this is I guess like a testimony, kind of, sort of, for me, because I have not given any details or specifics, but on whatever your journey is, just go with God. Go with God into the fire, because he's equipped you for, yes, the good, but he's equipped you for the fire too. And it's his plan, it's his purpose, and that's all we're here for. Amen.